So, in this video, we're going to talk about an even more complicated problem than we did the last problem, showing that languages are not semi-decidable. And to do this, we're going to talk about the same languages that we did before, but particularly we're going to refer to their complements. So remember, if we have the set of all strings that are h any, then the outside of that is the set of all strings that are in the complement. So a few things to remember. That the halting problem is semi-decidable and not decidable, and that the same is true for the h of any and h of all problems. And we also need to remember the closure properties for the set D and the set SD, so the set of decidable and the set of semi-decidable languages. We know that the decidable languages are closed under complement. So if we take all of the decidable languages and we take one of those and we complement it, then the resulting language must be decidable. But we know that the semi-decidable languages are not closed under complement. So, 4 languages, just like before. In fact, these 4 languages are simply the complement of the 4 languages that we talked about in the last video. So, we should know from the lectures that this language here, the complement of the halting problem, is not even semi-decidable. So we talked about the halting problem, and we figured out that we can actually semi-decide that problem, but we can't decide that problem. And that key fact that we said is semi-decidable but is not decidable is what will tell us later that the complement of the halting problem is definitely not decidable or semi-decidable. It is outside the set SD. Now, in this video, we will only discuss this language here, and we'll show 2 methods for showing that it is not semi-decidable. Now, one of those methods is simple enough that it immediately proves for all 4 of these languages that they are not semi-decidable. And that'll be the first method we will discuss. But we will also discuss a reduction method, and I would recommend you looking at the remainder of these problems and seeing if you can reduce from this problem as the gold standard of not a semi-decidable problem to the others and prove thus that they are also not semi-decidable. And ultimately, the semi-decidable reductions are not much more complicated than the decidable reductions. Now, one other thing we have to discuss here is a careful definition of what we mean when we complement these languages. So we know that the complement of a language is all of the strings that were not in the original language, so we essentially take the yes and no instances and swap them. But the key thing here is the idea of an overall universe that we're complementing in. Because if we've got our universe here and we've got some set L, then the complement is everything outside of that L in that universe. Now, our assumption here is that our universe is not just the set of all things I can make with the alphabet of encodings for machines, but instead the set of all strings that consist of valid encodings of simple Turing machines. Now, because that particular set itself is decidable, that doesn't affect our overall thing here. But I would suggest going back through the lecture notes and the textbook and making sure you are happy with the idea that we don't need to consider the strings that represent invalid Turing machines when we talk about these complements. Now, one thing you should remember is that if we have a language that is semi-decidable, and we show that its complement is also semi-decidable, then we've actually shown that the original language was decidable. The reason being is that if I can semi-decide both a language and its complement, then if I have those semi-deciding Turing machines, I can simply run them in parallel on any particular instance, and they are guaranteed to each accept. So if the machine that is deciding L accepts, then I simply halt and accept. But if the machine that is deciding the complement of L halts and accepts, then I simply halt and reject, because I know that's an instance of not L, so it's definitely a no instance to the original language. Now, suppose we want to know whether a particular language is semi-decidable. So we're worrying about a particular language, L', and we want to know if it is semi-decidable. Let's say that two facts that we do know is that its complement is semi-decidable. So the complement L' is semi-decidable, and we know that either the complement or that language are not decidable. So we know that complement L' is definitely SD, and we know that one of two things: either we know L is not decidable, or we know L complement is not decidable. Sorry, there should be dashes. As soon as we know those two things, we know that this first question is a no. Because if both L' and its complement were semi-decidable, then by our earlier reasoning, we would know that L is in the decidable languages, and because the decidable languages are closed under complement, we would also know that its complement is in the decidables. But the first assumption that we took was that at least one of them is not decidable. So what we can do is talk about the language and whether or not its complement is semi-decidable but not decidable. So it's in the set SD, take away the set D. So we're going to use this complement approach to prove that the complement of H of any is not semi-decidable. So that's our theorem. Our proof is that we know that the complement of this particular language, which was our original language H of any, is semi-decidable. So we know H of any is in SD, but we also know that H of any is not in D. So we can say this. But H of any is the complement of the language we care about, because the language we cared about was the complement of H of any. So obviously we have this trivial relationship here. So by our reasoning before, if the complement H of any was semi-decidable, then it would be decidable, and H of any would be decidable, but we knew that that wasn't the case here. So it's actually quite simple using known languages already to reason on the fact that any language which is semi-decidable but not decidable, its complement must be not decidable. So if we look back at our Chomsky hierarchy and we have the decidable languages and the semi-decidable languages, we knew that complement took us from the set D back into the set D. What we actually know as well is that complement will take us from the set SD except for the set D and take us definitely out into the surroundings here of the non-semi-decidable languages. So before, with the decidable languages, what we did is we took a language which we knew was not decidable, so for instance the halting problem, and we showed a conversion method which could turn yes instances of that problem into yes instances of the problem we care about, which I'll call P', and no instances into no instances, and thus we will show that if we can solve the second problem, the one that we care about, that implies a solution for the first problem, which is where we get our contradiction. If we have a solution for this problem, then we must have a solution for this problem, but we know that we do not have a solution for that problem, therefore we do not have a solution for this problem. For the semi-decidables, the reduction approach is almost exactly the same. We just simply take semi-decidable and not semi-decidable languages. So what we show is a reduction from our language 1 to L2, and then we show that our language L1 is not semi-decidable. So this might be this is our known non-semi-decidable language. then we just show, quite simply, that our second language, which we care about, is also not semi-decidable. So, first we obviously choose L1 to be not a semi-decidable language, and we hypothesize the idea of an oracle which semi-decides the language L2. So that is the key. We work with languages that we know are not semi-decidable, and our reductions will hinge on the idea of only a semi-deciding Turing machine for oracle. Now obviously here we have to be careful when we consider the idea of swapping things around, and we can't swap, our reduction cannot swap accepting states for looping. Alright, so let's do this for that same language that we talked about before, the complement of does a machine accept any particular string. And we'll reduce from the complement of the halting problem. So a yes instance to this new complemented language is that our machine M does not halt on the given string W, and we are going to reduce those instances to instances of the complement of the halting problem, which is that there is no string that the machine it has been given halts on. What we'll do is we'll take machine input pairs that are potentially from the complement of the halting problem, and we will map them to new machines M hash, which inside of themselves may keep track of the original M and W, so they sort of have parameters M and W. And what we will make sure we do is that the yes instances map to yes instances, and that the no instances map to no instances, or rather the looping and the looping. So, our particular reduction here will take our instances of the halting problem, and it'll construct our instances M hash, and the way M hash will operate is upon being given its own input X, it will erase its own tape, so it'll get rid of that input X completely. Then it will write the W for the instances it was constructed with on the tape. So remember, this is this W here, what we constructed it with. Then it will run the original machine from the complement of the halting problem instance on that W. So what M hash actually does is it just always runs the original machine on the original string and ignores whatever its own input is. And we can see that immediately what that machine will do is on any particular input that it has been given, it will run MW. Thus, for all X, our machine M hash will halt if M halts on W, and not otherwise. Now we're going to discuss what that means on the next slide. So let's assume that we have an oracle which can semi-decide this language here. It can tell us if there is no possible string that our machine halts on. Well, then we know that our machine then can semi-decide the complement here from this reduction. Because remember, for all possible inputs our machine M hash is given, it will only end up running M on W. So if M halts on W, then our machine will halt on all strings. And the only way our machine will halt on no strings, so i.e. being a yes instance to this problem, is if the original machine M didn't halt on W, which is exactly the question we're trying to semi-decide with this. Now the key thing is here, we don't have to worry about an oracle that decides the problem. We only have to worry about the semi-decision. The case that we have no instances to M hash, no instances of M hash to the complement H any, we don't have to worry about what happens in those because our oracle will only semi-decide this language. So strings where our original machine does run forever aren't really a problem. So let's go back and revisit that again. If our original string was a member of the complement of the halting problem, then that means that M does not halt on W. So that means that M hash halts on nothing, because every instance M hash gets given, it just runs M on W. So that means that it is an instance of this problem here, so our oracle will accept that new M hash. If our original string was not a member of the complement of the halting problem, then what that actually means is that M does indeed halt on W. So what that means is that our M hash will halt on everything, because every input that we give to M hash, it just runs M on W. So for every input, it'll run M on W, and for this particular instance, M does halt on W, so our M hash will halt on everything. So therefore our oracle will say that this is not part of the complement here, because all strings our M hash halts on, so therefore it's certainly not going to not halt on any string. So that means that if we have a way to semi-decide the complement HNE, then we have a way to semi-decide the complement H. But we know that this is not possible, so therefore this must not have been possible either. So because our oracle can't exist, that contradiction, then this must be the case, that the complement of HNE is not semi-decidable. So there were some halting problem variants that we discussed before that we haven't proven to be not semi-decidable, but we actually showed that they were trivially not semi-decidable just by showing that they're the complement of languages that are in the semi-decidables but not the decidables. That was pretty trivial. Now here we have 8 more languages that are quite similar. We have the membership language. So we had the halting problem which says, does our machine halt on W? This language is the language of all Turing machine input pairs where the Turing machine accepts that particular string. So that's why we use A instead of H. So instead of halting, our machine has to accept that string. We also have the language of all machines which accept the empty string, the language of all machines where there is at least one input that our machine accepts, and the language of all Turing machines that accept all possible inputs. Now these are just like the halting problem variants. We can show that some of them are semi-decidable quite easily, and we can show that they're definitely all not decidable using the methods that we've discussed in this video and the previous video. So I recommend, once you've got your head around the halting problem variants, that you look at these accepting variants. And it's fairly trivial to take the halting problem and reduce it to this problem. And then you can either reduce the halting problem to all of these problems, or you might prefer to reduce A to all of these problems. And by doing so, show that they're not decidable. Then you can talk about the fact that they're complement. Then you can talk about their complements and show immediately that their complements are not even semi-decidable. So let's go back to our Chomsky hierarchy and look at what we actually did. So like we said before, we've already shown all these things are pretty cruisy. These things here, we showed that if we can prove that a language and its complement are semi-decidable, then they're definitely decidable. So this is how we prove that we're in D. We've obviously shown that if we can produce a deciding Turing machine, that our language is decidable, and we know that if we can produce a semi-deciding Turing machine, then our language is semi-decidable. We haven't talked much about some of the other methods, but we're just listing them there so you can see that there's more than one way to skin a Turing machine. Now, the big thing that we did in this video was talk about how to prove that we're not in D, and we did that using reductions, and how to prove that we're not in SD. And we did that by either using a semi-decidable reduction proof, or by using the closure properties and showing that the complement of the language we care about is in the semi-decidables minus the decidables. So at this point, what we've got is a fairly complete hierarchy of most of what we know about various language memberships and ways for us, for you as a student, to prove that languages are in or out of any of those major language groups. Now, obviously, if you keep pursuing this field of study, you'll find that there's many more possible membership things, but they all fit in and around this particular hierarchy. What you'll also find is that this is the hierarchy for how the ability to solve a problem with a particular model, be it a finite state machine or a context-free grammar or a Turing machine. Now, what you'll learn later, particularly when you go through and study the theory of complexity and algorithms, is that we can end up with very similar hierarchies of things that we can problems that we can solve in certain amounts of time. And when you get to the higher order end of that study, you'll end up using very similar reduction concepts that we've done before. You'll reduce from known complex problems to your own problem and show that your problem must be complex. So this idea here, these methods, and this idea of creating sets of things that we know about and being able to reason about our ability to solve them based on our ability to solve other problems, is going to take you very far in studying a number of other areas of computer science.